Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar Weekly Discussion topic video. Today's topic is going to be the future of Avatar comics, both Avatar, The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra comics, because I do think there is some confusion about both, and most of it does stem from, for the most part, lack of communication from Dark Horse, just them not really being clear about yeah, we're planning to continue this, or there will be more, and just when an announcement is just for one thing versus when it's an announcement of like a ongoing series type stuff. So, let's actually start off with what Avatar merchandise is still to come out. What do we know is confirmed? And when you really break it down, there are 5 confirmed books that we know about. I feel it's 6 if you stretch it. And the order of release is that the next thing that's going to be coming out is the Legend of Korra coloring book, which is going to be out July 12th in comic book stores. And obviously that's just a follow-up to the Avatar coloring book from last year. It's going to be fun, but you know, it's not the most important piece of merchandise released per year. The thing after that, though, is very important. That's the first proper Korra comic, Legend of Korra Turf Wars Part 1. This is going to be big. This is going to be a huge comic for Dark Horse. The sales are going to be pretty big on this one. The excitement, the news articles, just the buzz around this one, the hype, is going to be huge. More so than any comic we've had in any way recently. There's just so much excitement about this. Admittedly, mostly for Korra Sami. But it coming, you know, I suppose not like crazy far removed from the end of Korra. There's still some excitement there. You know, you can see where the excitement is for this book. This book is going to be out July 26th in comic book stores. After that, we have the North and South Library Edition collection, which is coming out October 25th. That's just going to collect the 3 parts of North and South with some extras. Hopefully the annotations will give us some extra insight into the book. Then we have Turf Wars Part 2, which has an early release date in terms of like, I don't know if it's confirmed release date, of January 17th, 2018 in comic book stores. Then we're kind of stretching it and kind of like, of course, it's a trilogy. We know there will be a Turf Wars Part 3. And just at a complete guess, speculation, that book is going to probably be, June, July, August 2018, maybe a little bit later. Then there obviously is going to be a Turf Wars hardcover library edition, which, if that, July, August date is probably in or around what it is, we're probably looking at, maybe December, first couple of months of 2019 for that book being released. Beyond that, we don't know of any other Avatar merchandise. Wire Industries haven't announced any other figures. There's been no new, Avatar or Korra Nendoroids announced. They're the only books that we know exist right now for Avatar that are coming. The big thing that is just completely missing from that list is Avatar comics after North and South. And this is what the confusion has been for months now. Basically, I think, especially since the release of Part 2, since we've gone past that kind of time period where you'd usually tell us what the next Avatar comic is around this time, what's wrong this time, and especially what they didn't mention at Comic-Con last year, SDCC or NYCC, you could see where a lot of people are getting very frustrated with Dark Horse about, why have we ended North and South and we just have absolutely no idea if Avatar comics are going to continue? It's not just a case of, it's us being, overly expectant of news. It's just, you've ended an Avatar comic and just haven't said if there is going to be another one at all. You've said nothing about it. And the reason you said nothing about it is because you're preparing for Korra comics. Which makes it even worse in that it makes it seem like you are just completely telling everyone, we are replacing your Avatar comics with these Korra comics. Which, admittedly, it's all Avatar, and that's fun, but there are definitely people who prefer Avatar over Korra. There are people the other way as well who prefer Korra over Avatar. But the thing here is that they've built their comic audience, in terms of the people who buy the Avatar comics, on ATLA comics. 15 volumes in now. There are people who are invested in the comic story that you have going on. And so just, at the very least, abandoning Avatar comics for, this time, in terms of not saying anything, you can see why there's a lot of frustrated people out there who are just like, wait, why are you starting a new comic series and just completely stopping these comics at a pretty important point? Because the timing on this is actually not all that great. This is probably the worst possible time to end Avatar comics or go on a break with Avatar comics. Given that, from what I've seen, the general reaction to North and South has been, it's fine. Like, it's just got a very kind of neutral reaction. People don't hate it, but they're also not like really super excited for it. It's just another book. It just really felt kind of inconsequential. Especially with how it dealt with the plot at the end, that it's just like, oh yeah, the plot's still open, we'll touch on it. Yeah. And then especially with the comic previous to North and South, Smoke and Shadow, leaving Azula's story like still open to be resolved. And I think that's where you have so many people investment. That's where the investment right now is in Avatar comics, with Azula's story and the hope that they will at some point tell the really notable story about what really happens with Azula. Does she just stay as she is as the villain and fade away, or does she ever have a turnaround? Does she ever meet with her mother again? What happens there? They're the sort of questions that people want to know about, and they're the questions that we're not really getting asked. It's those sort of things that kind of show where I think the direction with especially North and South, has kind of missed the mark a bit. That it went for its own story when what people really wanted about this nostalgic return to the South was a lot of just really fun character interactions. They wanted to see Zuko come down to the South and have some awkward, fun interactions with Gran apologizing for what he did when he first met her. You wanted to have Aang and Katara have some really, really, really notable kind of moments between each other down in the South and just kind of reflect on where we've been. And then on a more plot-focused sense, I think what everyone really wanted was just, okay, define what the relationship between the North and South is at this point in time. What are the conflicts? Move those conflicts to a point where, like, okay, we've dealt with something. There are still other problems, but we've actually touched on something and made a notable move towards where things are in Korra. But they didn't really do that. They didn't really help ease any of the confusion that we have and kind of still have about, like, Unalaq's the chief of both tribes in Korra, and then the independence happened. It's still very confusing, and again, this is where you, I think, bring in New York Comic Con from last year. What was the thing they did at the very end of that panel? The Nickelodeon representative kind of sparked the idea during the Q&A. They had Janet Varney go around the audience with a microphone and ask, they did, obviously it wasn't everyone, but they asked a lot of people in the audience, a lot of different people, what do you want to see in future Avatar comics? And they meant, I think, Avatar and Korra. And everyone's response was some sort of an ATLA thing, this little a character moment or a story, fill in these gaps that we don't have. No one was really asking for stuff like, oh, I want this new Avatar Korra comic character that does this. They were all like, Iroh's backstory, when do Aang and Katara get married? These sort of questions, like the kind of sort of fan servicey things that we just really, really want to see. And I think perhaps there was an element of like surprise when they heard that that's what everyone wants. I think there definitely was surprise there, just that all of the feedback was just, oh, they just want the character interaction stuff and the kind of bigger plot moments, whereas obviously I think that's where North and South kind of missed the mark, and that was like the plot, especially of part 3, is like this Gilak kidnap attempt thing, and it just took away from so many character interactions we could have had. So I keep thinking about that and kind of like, what are they going to do with that feedback? Because they wrote down all of that stuff, all of those suggestions that everyone at that panel made. They wrote them down and they said they were going to like give them to Mike and Brian and, you know, actually use that information that they got. Very clearly, you know, the person who's basically managing Avatar from Nickelodeon's perspective is noting what the fans actually want. That, I hope that goes somewhere and it wasn't just an attempt to have something somewhat interesting for the fans at that panel. Because it's just such an awkward position that we're in right now, that we just get to the end of North and South Part 3 and there's just no idea about what's next for Avatar comics. It's a bad point to end, as I said, regardless of where the story is. And then with the speculation that's been going on for years that what has to happen next is a time skip, what's happening now? Now, let's actually address that. So, based on the schedule, what looks like is happening is that it's the same as usual, basically, in that we're just getting the next Avatar comic. It's just that Avatar comic happens to be a Korra comic. So, the speculation would be that the next Avatar comic would probably be announced towards the end of Turf War's release cycle. And what I mean by that is in or around in the gap between Turf Wars Part 2 and Turf Wars Part 3, they'll probably make the announcement about what the next Avatar comic is. Because here's the other problem. We've talked all about how we don't know the future of Avatar ATLA comics. What about Korra comics though? When that initial announcement was made, was the plan for it to be a series of ongoing comics like we have with Avatar? Or was it just announced as a one-off? I think if you look back, everyone took that announcement as, oh, it's going to be Korra ongoing comics. But given all the problems that we've had since then, and the amount of time that has passed since then, I get the impression that this is definitely morphed into okay, we're focusing on Turf Wars right now, and then we'll see where we are after that with Korra comics. I don't think there's an initial plan right now to immediately transition into another Korra comic series after Turf Wars. I think they'll keep them open to a degree, but the reason I say that is because if you look at Irene Coe on social media, I definitely get the impression that she's there for this Korra comic series because she is a fan of Korra. This was a passion project for her, that the exact thing that she wanted from the comic industry, she got the job that she wanted, basically, at a point where it seems like she was kind of very down on the kind of comics industry. And then just with regards to all the delays and the pressure of this project, I can't really see her signing up immediately after finishing 3 books on to do another 3 books. So I feel that what's happening at the end of Turf Wars is that they're going to be looking for another artist again. Now, maybe they can just bring Brittany Williams back on board. Maybe her schedule will have cleared up now. But I'm not sure about that. But at the very least, I think it leaves a gap big enough for Avatar comics to come back in. But the problem, again, has always been will you please tell us if there is a specific reason for why Avatar and Korra comics can't kind of happen at the same time? This is really weird in that, this is like Marvel coming out and saying that, oh, we can only ever have one comic series happen at once. We only have enough, time and effort to do one comic series at a time. We'll do this Captain America miniseries, then we'll do Iron Man, instead of, as they actually do, they have Captain America, Iron Man, and all these other stuff going on at the same time. Now, I'm not asking for Avatar comics to have, 20 different books at the same time, but is 2 really a problem? Is it really a problem to have 2 creative teams? Just a Korra comic team and an Avatar comic team working at roughly the same time, having these kind of releases kind of planned out so that it's more spread out across the year rather than just being completely just islands to themselves in terms of the release window of books being 6-7 months apart and stuff like that. That's the problem with the communication, is that they're just not explaining anything to us. So it's just oh yeah, Avatar comics, we haven't said if they're going to continue or if they're not going to continue, and we haven't said what the effect of Korra comics is on them, and we haven't said why Korra and Avatar comics can't happen at the same time. We're just going to not say anything, and so it's just what? And the only thing we know is just that they definitely have changed the usual announcement schedule, in that it's very notable that a new Avatar comic hasn't been announced, when in the past it would at this stage have probably been announced. So that's why I'm definitely speculating that Turf Wars is the next Avatar comic, and then they'll maybe go into another Avatar comic next. And maybe that gap is something that will help Gene Yang and Team Gurihuru. It'll help them realize maybe some of the mistakes that were made in North and South in terms of the direction. Maybe they're planning for the big time skip and the new character designs, and what the plan is to do bigger things in the comic, more consequential things that will get people invested. Maybe that's what we're waiting for. But again, lack of communication. Now, the one thing I've left out of the schedule, of course, is that we have a San Diego Comic-Con and a New York Comic-Con this year, coming up in the next couple of months. So the questions are obviously, will they announce anything about like more products? Will there be an Avatar panel this year? I assume there will have to be, because of obviously Turf Wars Part 1. This is going to be the big hype thing of just like promoting this comic at a comic convention, and perhaps giving insight into Turf Wars Part 2. But I really, really think that if we get through these 2 conventions and we're not hearing about Avatar comics at all, there's just radio silence, they don't address the elephant in the room that is what's happening with Avatar comics, that's going to be in an even more frustrating situation, because it's been so long that people have been asking what's next for Avatar comics, what's the situation with Avatar comics. It's just really baffling why they're not saying anything. The other thing is maybe not necessarily, this is more speculation about what I would want from future Avatar comics, but I, at this point, I'm really beginning to think that the format that they have for Avatar comics right now perhaps isn't working as well as they think it is. And what I mean by that is the fact that all of the comic series are trilogies. Each series, named series, is 3 comics. Each of those comics is 72 pages in terms of the story pages of actual comic. And they have to write the story to be that exact length. And that was fine for The Promise. It was fine for The Search. It was fine for The Rift. Smoke and Shadow, is the first one I think that started to show signs that this wasn't quite working. And then I think North and South especially, I think that limitation really hit North and South. I think they were very affected by just Part 3 especially. We have to tell a story for Part 3 on its own, but it also has to resolve North and South overall. We can't do this. We have to just leave this open. In the future, I kind of want them to have a bit more freedom. Like, if they want to tell a story that is smaller, let them just release a single book. Like, if you can tell a story in like 70 pages, let them just tell a quick story that only takes 70 pages. If it takes 2 books, let them do that. If they have to do it longer and it be 4, 5, 6 books, let them do that. I don't get the restriction, why it always has to be this set template of like 3 books, 72 pages. Like, I really don't. And then the other thing, obviously, is why has there been no, in any way, mention of like Avatar comics in like single issue format? I don't get why this idea is never in any way touched upon, never discussed whatsoever. Outside of the free comics, which obviously come in single issue format, we've never had Avatar comics like this. When I think ultimately something like that would really help the fandom. A regular thing, knowing that there is going to be an issue of an Avatar comic released every month. That way we're always to a degree in some sort of a like exciting kind of time period, knowing that at absolute most we have like 4 or 5 weeks between the next little bit of story that we're going to get. And I think that's kind of what we need. We need a little bit more regularity in the fandom to kind of keep it going. There's just enough time between, the Avatar comics as they're released, 3-4 months, that there's always just this point right in the middle where there's nothing being talked about. Whereas I think a monthly series would be really cool to just get like, you're getting this like short, quick bit of story, and then you're immediately like, oh, what's going to happen next month, knowing you only have a few weeks to wait. You're going to get the preview just a couple of days before. It's a very clear and precise, time window. And I think the single issue format allows you to tell stories in a bit more of a, in the way you want it to. You don't have to be so limited as such, in that you can like be like, okay, we're going to tell the Iroh backstory. How many issues do we need? Let's say 5. That means like it's just over 100 pages or something like that. Maybe it's a 6-7 issue miniseries or something like that. We can just do that. Then maybe they could decide, we actually want to do an ongoing comic series. We'll set it at some point in the Avatar universe that really isn't touched. Here's this random Avatar you've never heard about before, but here's the unique thing with him and his time period and his group of friends. And you just tell the story of this third Avatar as like, this is the Avatar comic series that's focusing on this kind of comic Avatar. This is a original, Dark Horse story. It's canon, but it's just there's an avoidance of all of the kind of potential continuity moments around the Avatar and Korra stuff that we have right now, because that's the other thing I think, is that everything right now with Dark Horse has to be tied to Avatar and Korra. And I get that, they're the two key things, of course. But you're in the comic medium. You have fans who are just like fans of Avatar full stop, the universe. I'd like to see them just do a little bit more experimentation. Like, try out setting like a miniseries at a time period that we've never seen before, and have it be just completely all new original characters. And once you get the story right and it's interesting and it's adding something to the universe, you'll get people behind you, and I think it would just help to overall expand out Avatar's stuff. Because right now the releases just feel a little slow. It doesn't necessarily feel like we're just expanding the universe all that much. It just, especially North and South, it just feel like we were just spinning our wheels while like the comics continued. So the future of Avatar comics ultimately relies on Dark Horse and their communication. And again, it comes down to the situation of like, we don't even know the restrictions that they have. Like, for all we know, Dark Horse could be wishing they could tell us everything they have planned for Avatar, but Nickelodeon are stopping them. But we don't know that. They're not even telling us that. So there's a lot of frustration at the moment, I think, because North and South, that I don't think turned out to be what everyone expected, and now not knowing what's next. And now it's seeming like horror comics are just coming in and taking, taking Avatar's ATLA's lunch, and just that's taking over, and that's going to be exciting. I think there's a fear that if the Korra comics are successful, they might just abandon Avatar comics, especially if North and South hasn't got the biggest reaction as maybe they would have thought. So I'm just going to end it there before I start repeating myself, but in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on a lot of the topics I brought up here. What do you think is happening with the schedule coming up next? Do you agree that it's going to be Turf Wars and then they'll announce the next Avatar comic for after Turf Wars? Or what? What do you expect from the Comic Cons? Would you like to see the formats of these books change, moving away perhaps from the graphic novel format into a single issue format? These sort of questions basically are kind of the things I'm asking. Of course, like I think in terms of speculation about what the actual plots are going to be, I think they need to tell an Azula story. I think there probably isn't enough to it to perhaps do another story set in the South, but I can see them kind of filling us in on what's happening there. I think you do need a time skip at some point to get us just closer to the Republic City stuff, and just the idea that Yu Dao goes from being Earth and Fire to now including the Water Tribe as well. I think that's a connection that the comics at some point should make. The Water Tribe and the bigger connection to Yu Dao. We sort of are getting it, Earth and Fire refineries coming down to the South, but they haven't properly made the connection just yet. So just little links like that I'd really like to see. And then other stuff just like, when does Aang find the Sky Bison in where we are, from where we are right now? When does Aang find the other Sky Bison? When does he decide that Air Temple Island needs to be a thing, and so on? So they're kind of little things there. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the topic. But that's been the video for today. Thanks for watching, and bye.